Buttons get all the love in Unity, and in my humble opinion, toggles are underappreciated. So for you mavericks out there who want to use toggles, I'll show you how you can use them in your games. I've got this scene in Unity, which is a tower defense game I stole from a Brackeys tutorial. You can see I've got some turrets at the bottom, which are buttons that can be clicked on and enable us to place turrets on the tiles. Wonderful stuff, but in a game like this, I'd like some visual feedback on which turret I've actually got selected right now, as well as the ability to deselect the turret by clicking on the icon again. Right now, if I click on the icon, it doesn't deselect the turret. The only way to do that is by clicking on a turret that is already placed. So let's convert these bad boys to toggles and spice things up a bit. First, we'll duplicate the current shop setup. This shop just has 3 child buttons representing each turret icon, and each of these objects just has a button component on it that when clicked calls a function in the shop script that's sitting on the parent shop object. What we want to do is get rid of these button components and replace them with toggle components. So first we'll add a new toggle group component to our parent shop object. This isn't the toggle itself, but is more like a controller for all the toggles that are part of its group. You don't necessarily need this for toggles, but it allows us to run logic on a set of toggles that we define, for example enabling or disabling all of them. Next we'll get rid of these buttons and create a new toggle. You can see this object has the toggle component on it, which is similar to the button component but with a few new saucy additions. For one, it has a boolean called isOn, which tells us whether this specific toggle is currently selected. If I untick the isOn field, you'll see the graphic for the toggle changes with the tick mark disappearing. What this is targeting is whether the image assigned to the graphic field is showing or not. If I expand this object, you can see it has a child called background, which in turn has another child called checkmark. The first child is just a white box and is the target graphic here on the toggle component. You can think of this image as what is shown when the toggle is turned off. The second child is only displayed when the toggle is on, so I'm going to name it to selected image. Next you can see this group field. This is where we put the toggle group that we want this toggle to belong to. We put the toggle group on our shop object, so if I select my toggle and drag our shop object into the field, it will take the toggle group component that's sitting on it and assign our toggle to that group. Notice that after assigning this toggle to a group, we can no longer toggle the graphic using the isOn boolean. To re-enable this, we need to go to our toggle group and enable allow switch off. This allows our toggle group to control the isOn state of our toggles, so you can now see the toggling is working again. Next, we'll want to replace the images. So we replace the first image that is always showing with the turret icon and the second image with a green box to indicate that the turret is currently highlighted. Now when we toggle it on and off, you can clearly tell whether the turret is selected or not. The last part of the toggle component we'll look at is the onValueChanged part. This function is very similar to the onClick function for a button and is essentially called every time we click the toggle and change the isOn status to true or false. We're going to click the plus sign and drag in our shop parent, assigning the function selectStandardTurret. You want this to be the function that runs the logic every time you click on the toggle. Finally, we'll duplicate the turret icon toggle and make sure each function that is being called when the toggle is clicked corresponds to the correct turret. Now that the toggle setup is done, it's time to get coding. We'll go to our shop class and look at the selectStandardTurret function that is run every time the toggle's value is changed. This calls another function that selects the turret we want to build, passing in the turret that corresponds to the icon we just clicked. If I go to this function, you can see it's just setting the turret to build to whatever we pass in this case a standard turret. Now remember, this function is going to be called every time the toggle's value changes. That means when we go from deselected to selected and selected to deselected. When we go from deselected to selected, we want to make sure that we have a turret to build so that when we click on a tile it will create a turret. But when we go from selected to deselected, by clicking on the toggle again, we want to clear the turret. Right now that doesn't happen. Instead, even though the toggle is deselected, we can still build a turret. So what we need to do is add some logic to the function that's responsible for selecting our turret and check whether we have that turret already selected. When we pass in a turret that is already equal to the turret we have selected to build, we know we're clicking on the toggle while it's already on, and therefore the player is trying to deselect the turret. So in this case we need to clear the turret. Otherwise, if the turret that is being passed in is different to the one that is currently selected for build, we know we're clicking on a new toggle that isn't currently selected. So we update the turret to build with this new turret. With this one change, we now have the functionality we dreamed of. When I click a turret icon, I can see which turret I've got selected. Then if I click the turret again, it deselects the turret and we can't build anything. And finally, if I click on a new turret while I have a different one selected, it updates the turret to build. Now, if you remember, another way to deselect the turret is by clicking on one of these white nodes that already has a turret on it. Right now, if I do that, the turret to build is set to null, so we can't build anything, but the toggle UI isn't updated. Instead, it looks like we have the standard turret selected to build, but in reality, we don't have anything selected. So what we need to do is clear any selected toggles when we click a node with a turret on it. The function responsible for selecting a node is here, and you can see that when the node is selected, we're setting the turret to build to null, and therefore stopping us from building anything, but we're not updating our toggle UI to reflect this. So here we need to do that. If we go back to our shop class, we want a function that clears all the toggles, essentially setting their isOnBoolean to false. To do that, we need a reference to our toggle group that we placed on our shop object. All the toggles we have are linked to this toggle group, and we can use this to run logic across all our toggles. So first I'm going to grab a reference to the toggle group component that's on this game object. Then I'm going to create a function called clearToggles that will call the function setAllTogglesOff. This is a function that is contained in the toggle group class provided by Unity that just loops through all the toggles and sets their isOnBool to false. An important point to note is that if this send callback bool is set to true, which it is by default, the function that we have specified in the toggle's onValueChanged will be run, which is not what we want because then a turret will be selected. So we need to pass in the argument false when we call this function to prevent that from happening and ensure that it just changes the toggle UI without running any of the logic we specified in the onValueChanged event. Now that we've done this, all we need to do is call this function whenever we want to clear our toggles. In this case, when we select a node, we'll clear our toggles and make sure they're all turned off. I usually use an event here, but for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to add a reference to our shop script and call the clearToggles function directly. Now going back to our game, we can see that any turret we had selected is switched off when we click on a node that has a turret on it. The final bit of functionality I want to show for toggles is the ability to loop through the toggles in a toggle group ourselves and run our own logic on them, for example changing whether the player can interact with them. Right now in our tower defense game, placing a turret costs money, and that controls how many turrets you can place. This makes sense for a tower defense game, but in other games we might want to limit the total number of structures we can have at any one time, and after we've placed a certain amount, no more can be placed. To do this, we can go back to our shop class and define two new fields. One that records the number of turrets placed, and one that defines the maximum number of turrets allowed to be built. In this case, I'll set that to 3. Then we can define two new functions. The first will be called every time we build a turret, and once we reach the maximum allowed, we can disable our toggles. The second will actually disable our toggles, and to do this we create an array of toggles. In this case, all the toggles that are the child of the game object this shop class sits on. Then we loop through the toggles and set their interactable bool to false. This essentially disables the toggle and means the player can't click on it. Then we'll clear the toggles to make sure that if one is selected when we disable our toggles, it's turned off. You'll also want to make sure that the turret that is currently selected when we disable our toggles is cleared so that we can't make any more turrets. Again, you can use an event here, but I'm just going to create a function in the build manager that clears the turret to build and call it directly when we disable our toggles. Finally, we need to call the increment turret counter function whenever we build a new turret, which in this case is done in this build turret function here, but in your game it'll be wherever the player places a resource you have a maximum limit on. Then going back to our game, we can see that after placing 3 turrets down, the toggles are disabled and we can no longer place any more down. You can re-enable the toggles in the exact same way as disabling them, but just setting interactable here to true. And that's toggles.